That very first story, An Unearthly Child, grabbed the imagination of the viewers. But it wasn't until the Daleks made their menacing way onto the screen that the programme picked up a massive and dedicated audience.
We'll see the Daleks' first appearance in 10 minutes, so it gives us a chance to find out how the Daleks began. So welcome again to Russell Enoch, one of the early companions, who first struggled with the Daleks way back in 1964. And also a big welcome for the companion who came top of the fans' top 10 companions list, Elisabeth Sladen. Quite an accolade, that.
Thank you. I'd like to be totally modest, but I'm absolutely delighted.
Now, what were your experiences with Daleks? Elisabeth first.
Well, I think the first time that I really remember the Daleks was with Jon Pertwee, and they're meant to be so totally and utterly menacing. I mean, we were in a sand quarry, I forget where, and they had to put rails down for them because they couldn't trundle along on the sand. They weren't quite as menacing as they should be. And they had to turn a corner rather sharply. And they were coming along at a good lick, and all of a sudden they started to very slowly just go over, right into the sand.
Terribly menacing.
Very, very.
Russell.
Well, my story really is a more gentle story because my eldest daughter, Vanessa, had been able to watch them, the Daleks, from home, you see, and she'd become terrified, so I used to hide behind the sofa, and when the Daleks came, she disappeared, you see.
Oh, bless her.
And one day I said, well, you know, they're really not that frightening. You must come to the studio and meet Bill, and you can meet a Dalek, you see. And so she met the Dalek, and first of all, she met it with the top on. And that was very scary.
Yeah.
But then I said, could you lift the top off? And she actually sat in the Dalek. So I've got a rather charming picture at home of my daughter, who was then very young, sitting in the Dalek, in a Dalek, with Bill and myself and Caroline and...
Never frightened of Daleks again?
Never frightened again, no.
Now, the Daleks were originally created by Terry Nation, their chilling cruelty, their robot technology, ensuring them lasting popularity. Terry Nation, now a Hollywood writer and producer, and the early production team had no idea the Daleks would become one of the landmark creations of science fiction. Our Los Angeles producer, Irene Levin, caught up with him.
I had grown up in the cinema, at the front row of the Odeon all my life, practically. And I used to love what were then rated H pictures, horror films. And there was the Mummy and the Frankenstein monster and all of those things. And even though I thought they were wonderful, I always knew that the monster was a man dressed up. And so when I came to make my own monster, I wanted to make sure that it was not a man dressed up. Now, anything you can do with that, I think, is to take the legs. When I wrote that first block of Dalek episodes, I worked on the assumption that this was take the money and fly like a thief. The show cannot last beyond its original 13. I mean, what a dumb show, I said. And so I killed them off, knowing that there would be no future for these guys. Then I figured, we had to get them back. And I felt a bit like Conan Doyle trying to get Sherlock Holmes back from the Reichenbach Falls. But then it occurred to me that we were moving through time, so what we saw was the ultimate end of the Daleks, and now we could go back and see other things that they had done in time, which justified it for me, and I think everybody else, but we finally didn't care too much, you know. I think they had a voice that you could imitate, I think you could glide around, and I think they were bad. They weren't grey, there weren't nice bits about them, they were bad guys, and I think everybody could relate to that. Doctor Who and the Daleks probably helped science fiction enormously. I mean, science fiction was a dirty word. It was sub-literature at that time. It has introduced kids, to good science fiction, who then went on to read the great writers of science fiction. It's now certainly science fiction is a bigger part of our culture than it ever was when we came on the air. So I think it's very valid to say we did make a contribution.
Our prisoners are intelligent and perhaps dangerous. Why not exterminate them?
I have a great pride in the fact that the word is in the dictionary, that I created these creatures, that they still exist. I And I suppose everything surprises me, but now it's that they've been a part of my life for so long that I can't think of my career without them.
I am the master.
They're really scary in black and white, aren't they? Now, just in case you aren't familiar with the full range of horror displayed by the Daleks, here's an example of how they relentlessly pursue their enemies to the ends of the universe.
And are they still out there seeking the good doctor? Almost certainly. Well, with me now is designer Ray Cusick, who was responsible for putting the flesh, or rather putting the hardboard on the Daleks way back when, in 1963. Ray, what was the brief like?
Very brief. It was about 4 lines in the script. They had an eye on a stalk. They moved about with any apparent feet. So what I did was to telephone Terry Nation, the author, and discuss it with him. And that was still very brief. So it was really thinking cap time, really.
Well, I think you did a wonderful job. I did hear that you actually designed the innards of a Dalek as well.
Not for the programme. It was editorial policy not to show the Dalek itself. The idea being, well, twofold, really. They didn't want to frighten the children, because it was meant to be a family-type programme. And also, they thought that if you imply horror, your mind will fill in the rest, not to show horror in full, as it were.
Now, I know we do actually see one version of a Dalek's innards in the story that we're going to see a little later today. But you have actually written a book about your early time on Doctor Who.
I collaborated on a book, yes. Doctor Who in the early years.
Right, we'll have to leave it there, Ray. After the break, we have the first 3 episodes of a 7-part adventure which turned Doctor Who into an overnight success with more than 8 million viewers. And for those of you who remember with affection ITV's Robin Hood, watch out for Alan Wheatley, alias the Sheriff of Nottingham, who plays the leader of the Thals. So stay tuned for the Daleks.